Hello, and welcome back. We have Star Wars Rebel Force. This is Chapter 8, so let's get right into it. Blood seeped through the bandage. A crimson stain spread swiftly across his shirt. He'd slashed himself deeper than intended and could feel the life pumping out of him with each step. No matter. They would find him when he was ready to be found. And when that happened, a graver injury could only work in his favor. No one would ever guess that the gashes had come from his fire blade rather than the crash. X7 had waited an hour before activating the distress beacon, and in the meantime, he'd been busy. After laying the trail, he doubled back, lying in wait for his rescuers to arrive. Now he shadowed them as they followed the tracks he laid, leaving the Wookiee and the little R2 droid to guard the ship. He watched closely as the princess forged ahead, the two men scrambling to keep up with her. So the princess was foolhardy and her friends powerless to stop her from blundering into trouble. Interesting. X7 followed it away for future reference. He tread silently and stayed close. From a few paces behind, he could hear them bickering, could hear the protocol droid complaining, could hear the two men dither over which way to go as the tracks faded. They didn't look like much of a threat. Still, X7 knew better than to trust his first impression. Many men had made the mistake when encountering him. Few lived to make it a second time. Wincing at the pain in his shoulder, he drew out his dart shooter, took aim at the taller male, and fired. The man slapped at the back of his neck, then examining his palm, likely looking for the insect that he had bitten him, then shrugged and continued walking. X7 paused, letting them get further ahead. He didn't want to be too close when the pheromone dart did its job, releasing a scent that would draw the nearest reek. When the beast found a group of humans instead of a potential mate, X7 suspected it would be rather displeased. Once the creature attacked, X7 would draw closer again, watching them defend themselves. It would be the best way to gauge their weaknesses, and if the beast was able to slaughter the one exuding the pheromones, so much the better. X7 would intercede before it could harm the princess. She could hardly refuse to trust him after that. There was a faint roar in the distance. A moment later, the ground began to shake. Here it comes, X7 thought. Let the games begin. Luke grabbed a hold of the nearest boulder, trying to keep his balance as the ground rumbled. Moonquake? He asked. Leia shook her head, pointing a finger over his shoulder. Luke whirled around. A giant beast lumbered toward them on legs thick as tree trunks. It hunched back, rose to nearly 3 times Luke's height. A horn stuck out of each side of its face, while a third sputtered from its forehead, sharp as a knife, and thicker at its base than a human torso. It looks like a reek. Luke drew his lightsaber. The Hutts on his home planet sometimes use them as execution animals. They're mostly herbivores, but, Han yelped, lunging out of the way as the reek swiped at him with a trunk-like leg. But when their skin turns all reddish-brown like that, it usually means they've got a taste for meat, Luke admitted. Han whipped out his blaster and took aim, but the blaster fire bounced off the reek's tough hide. I'm no one's meat, he shouted, scrambling up a shallow hill of rocks to get a better angle. The reek lowered its head and charged. Get down, princess, Han called to Leia as he dove out of the way just in time. She ducked behind the nearest rocky outcropping. C-3PO was already cowering beneath it. Leia elbowed him aside and began blasting at the reek with her laser pistol. Han fired again, but the reek only grunted, charging straight through the blaster bolts. Luke raised his lightsaber, but froze. What good was the lightsaber against a creature like this? Even if he could get close enough to strike, he'd probably be crushed before he could do any good. A lightsaber is the only weapon a Jedi needs, Ben had told him. Easy for Ben to say, Luke thought now. He knew how to use it. Forget the toy, Han yelled, running at full speed from the lumbering reek. He paused every few seconds to turn back and shoot, aiming for a different spot each time in hopes of finding a weakness in the thick hide. But it was no use, and the reek showed no signs of tiring. Blast the thing before it has me for dinner. The blasters aren't hurting it, Luke shouted back. At the sound of his voice, the reek turned around, as if noticing him for the first time. It grunted, stomped, and then took off for Luke. It was too close, and coming too fast. He couldn't get out of the way. Luke fumbled for his blaster, but it got caught in its holster. The reek drew closer. "Hey, what about me?" Han yelled, trying to distract it again. "Danner's this way, you horn-faced jerk." But the reek was fixed on Luke. He knew if he tried to run, he could be trampled beneath the beast's mammoth feet before he got more than a few paces. So he held his ground. He raised his lightsaber, focusing on the shimmering blue blade, trying to block out his fear. Luke remembered Han's strategy with the TIE fighter. "I may not be strong enough to kill the reek," Luke thought, "but the reek doesn't know that." He ran toward the beast. "Luke!" Leia screamed. "No!" Luke stumbled over a large rock bulging out of the dirt. He hurtled wildly through the air, blade outstretched, and landed with a thump a few feet away, flat on his face. A kneeing howl split his eardrums, and then, with a thunderous crack, the world seemed to crumble beneath him. A moment later, all was silent and still. Luke rolled over and looked up at the concerned faces of his friends. "I'm not dead?" he said in confusion. Han laughed, but Luke could see the concern behind the smile. "Don't sound so disappointed, kid." Luke sat up, his head throbbing. "What happened?" "You tripped and fell flat on your face," Han said. "Yeah, that part I remember." He rubbed the back of his head, then twisted it from side to side, freezing as he caught the sight of the mighty reek. "Dead." "Oh, right," Han said, following his gaze. "There was also the part where your lightsaber sliced our friend here wide open. Poor guy was just trying to get a snack." "That poor guy nearly had all three of us as a 3-course meal," Leia exclaimed, giving Han a light smack on the shoulder. She tugged Luke up off the ground. "Are you sure you're okay?" Luke couldn't take his eyes off the reek. He'd really done it. He'd saved the day. With his lightsaber. If only he hadn't done it by accident. "Master Luke, I think I've picked up the trail again," C-3PO reported, gesturing toward the bloody footsteps that tramped further into the hills. Luke shuddered. Now that he knew what kind of creature was responsible for those tracks, he was even more worried about the fate of the injured pilot. They had to find him before it was too late. For almost half an hour, they followed the trail across the rocky landscape. It ended at the mouth of a cave. Han and Luke exchanged a glance. Luke guessed that they were both thinking the same thing. Something had gone into that cave. Probably something they didn't want to meet. Leia gave both of them a disgusted look, then strode inside. "After you," Han said dryly, but hurried after her. Luke followed. "If it's all the same to you, I'll just wait out here, Master Luke," C-3PO called. "I think I can be most of service if I—" His voice faded away as they penetrated deeper into the dark cave. "I think I see something," Leia whispered, striding ahead. "Yeah, but does it see us?" Han muttered. There was a body sprawled against the far wall of the cave. Leia hurried over, kneeling by its side. Luke and Han approached more slowly, keeping an eye on the mouth of the cave. The man was bloodied and pale, but his eyes were open. "You shouldn't have followed me," he rasped, struggling to breathe. "It's coming back." He broke off into a fit of coughing. "This is where—" He exploded into more coughs, then fell backward, exhausted by the effort. "What's he trying to say?" Han asked. Sensing a familiar rumble beneath his feet, Luke drew his lightsaber. "I think he's saying this is where it lives," he cried as a reek burst into the cave. Leia flung herself across the wounded pilot, shielding him with her body. Han grabbed his blaster. The reek lowered its horn and charged. "Blasting it doesn't work," Luke complained. "Let me handle this." "You had so much fun the first time," Han shot back. "That was just a fluke. Keep out of our way and try not to get yourself hurt." "But if you shoot that off in here, you'll—" Before Luke could finish, Han pulled the trigger, aiming for the mouth of the cave. Blaster fire ricocheted off the roof, dislodging a hail of giant rocks that rained down on the reek's head. The beast went down in a heap. "See, kid?" he said triumphantly. "I told you I'd—" He broke off as the ceiling continued to crumble. An avalanche of rocks came tumbling down. They pressed themselves against the cave wall as clouds of dust billowed up from the massive collapse. Moments later, the thunder of falling rocks died away. The dust cleared, and a wall of solid rock blocked off their only escape. "Handled it," Han finished in a weak voice. they were trapped. Nice. Alright. That puts us to chapter 9. Very, very nice. Put that away. We'll do just a little bit tapping sounds. But again, if you made it all the way through the video, I'm so glad you're here. I apologize, sometimes I stutter or fumble through the sentences. I'll read too far ahead and then I'll forget what I read, so I'll have to go back. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Like always, I hope you have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. And remember, stay hydrated, stay cool, and I'll see you all in the next video.